continuing on from where we left off. So now that you have the scales, you got the scales memorized, let's go ahead and start looking at them in a different way. So instead of looking at everything from going up and down, like vertically, we're going to look at them horizontally. We're going to play all the notes in key on 2 strings at a time. So the first thing, everything's on the B and E, B and E string, and this is just keep working on the alternate picking like you have been doing, which would make this an alternate picking exercise. Pretty much anything alternate pick would be that. But yeah, this is what it sounds like. Connecting, and we're starting with the open strings and going an octave higher. Okay, that's the first one. The next one is everything's on the D and G string. And the last one, everything's on the E and A string. Okay, so hopefully the pull-offs went well, so we're going to expand on that idea. So this next riff, everything's on the high E string, and we're starting on an A note. We're going to climb down to another A note, and what you're going to do is you pick the first note of every bar. Everything else will be hammer-ons and pull-offs. So, what you got starting on 17, you got your pick, hammer, hammer, pull, pull. So only picking that first note. So you got pick, hammer, hammer, pull, pull. Now notice my fingers, after I hammer on, I'm keeping my fingers down. So this way, they're ready for the pull-offs. So here's the whole thing, and it's just climbing down one note in key at a time until we hit that last note. The last note's just on its own because I thought it sounded better that way. So here we go. Okay. After you get the hang of that, we're basically doing the same thing, except you notice how the slur mark there starts on the 17, that first note, and goes all the way across to the very last note. And you see the diagonal lines connecting each bar? That means we're going to slide from note to note when we're changing bars. So this is a fantastic one to make sure that all your hammer-ons and pull-offs are being done properly, because if they are being done properly, then the slides will work just fine, because once you slide down after doing a proper pull-off, the string should still be ringing out, and this way you can continue your hammer-ons and your pull-offs, and it's really good for strengthening your fingers too. So should sound and it's the exact same set of notes you just did. It's just we're only picking the first note now. So this is what it'll sound like. I missed a couple hammer-ons. Let's do that again. So you have to use a bit of muscle there to really, especially if you're playing clean, it's much more difficult to make all the notes come out. But if you got some distortion going on, it's much easier. fact, I do recommend practicing both clean and with distortion, because with distortion you really got to make sure you're muting out everything that you're not playing so you don't have a bunch of unwanted noise. So moving on, we're going to look at some chords, and every key has your basically it's like a basic set of 7 chords, and each chord is built using notes in that key. So most of these chord shapes I would imagine you've already played. You may not have known the name, but most of these are very common. I'm going to assume that you do not know the last one, so I'm going to go through all of these, and the reason why I assume is because I'd say 90% of everyone I've taught had no idea what it is, and that's a generous percentage. So maybe 10% at most, but I think it's got to be less than that. It's a very unpopular chord. So anyway, so going in order, we have the C major chord, then a D minor, then we have an E minor chord, then we have the full bar chord for the F, and then we have G major, A minor, and the last one here, the one I mentioned, is called a B diminished. That's what that little circle means after the B note. So that says B diminished. I don't know why a degree symbol was picked for it, but that's just the way it is. So the little circle, the degree symbol, means diminished. So I actually wrote it in 2 ways, and also you see, I had to use some white out there to try and correct something, but I'll explain what's going on. The numbers in parentheses next to that first one. So reading the B diminished from bottom to the top, you have 2, 3, 4, 3. Those are the fret numbers. 2, 3, 4, 3. In parentheses, I have from the bottom to the top 1, 2, 4, 3. That's the number finger you're going to use to build it. So I got first finger, second finger, fourth finger, third finger. So that's how I'm building it. So you got first finger on the second fret of the A string, and then next string we go third fret, middle finger. Next string up we have fourth fret with the fourth finger, and the B string we finish with our ring finger on the third fret. The other way we're going to do the B diminished is we're going to have the index finger on 7th fret of the E string, then ring finger on the 8th fret of the A string, then we have our pinky on the 9th fret, and then our middle finger is going to hit the G string on the 7th fret. So we got 7, 8, 9, 7. Now, you may be wondering, why are we not barring this? Because it runs too high a risk of hitting that note, which is an F sharp, which is not part of the chord, and it's not part of the key you were playing in. So that's why we do it this way, because you have more control over those notes and more control over making sure nothing else rings out that you do not want. So, what we have below this is an exercise in using all these basic chords that happen in key, plus using the diminished chord as a passing chord. What that means, typically, when you have a whole step in between 2 different root notes of a chord, you can use a diminished chord to pass from one chord to the next. So it sounds better like if you're going from one chord up to a higher chord, you can throw a diminished chord in between to kind of add some color to going from one chord to the next. So what I mean by that, and the whole step is 2 frets apart. I don't remember if we've covered this or not, but basically if you go up 2 frets from 3, you land on 5. That's a whole step. If you want to go a half step, say from 5, you can go up to 6. That's a half step, so that's 1 fret apart. You can go down a whole step too, from like 5 to 3, or that's a whole step. 3 down to 2, that's a half step. So the basic thing is that, and I'm going to use a lot of bar chords or bar movable shapes throughout this because it's makes it a lot easier to hit these passing chords, and it sounds better this way too. It's also a great finger exercise. We really build all kinds of dexterity here. So let's take a C major chord, for example. I'm holding it like this. I got 3 on the A string, and then I'm barring the 5 on the D, G, and B string with my ring finger. It's a pretty commonly used bar chord shape for a major chord when you are starting on the A string. So anyway, so let's say you got the C major chord here. You go up a whole step to a D minor. That means your root note went from the 3rd fret to the 5th fret, so the 4th fret would be that position in between. So we can go C major to a C sharp diminished up to a D minor. So instead of doing something like this, we can throw the diminished in to spice it up a bit. And if you were going to go down, I think it sounds good to, like, say we're going from a D minor down to a C. Technically you could do this, but I think it sounds better if you're going to descend in pitch. Change that chord you're starting with into a diminished, and then go down to that chord. So I think it has a better resolve sound to it. So basically, you got the D minor, you change it to a D diminished, so you stay on the same root notes, and then we go down to the C. So it sounds something like this. So instead of this, we can throw in the diminished. I think it sounds a little more sad when you're doing the descent that way. So now that I've talked about what it means by using a diminished chord as a passing chord, we are going to use it all over the place, in between all the different chords that happen naturally in key. So when you see A sharp diminished, C sharp diminished, D sharp diminished, and so on, it's the same fingerings that you just learned up above on your tab. So any time a diminished chord starts on the A string, you use the first fingering that you used. The first finger, second finger, fourth finger, third finger. So it's the same fingering everywhere when you start that shape on the A string. When we get to the diminished chord starting on the E string, we're going to use the second type of fingering that you learned. So starting on the E string, you got your first finger, third finger, fourth finger, second finger, and everywhere we'll use that fingering. So you have that chord shape when you start on the low E string. And I'm going to grab some water. Okay, now the other thing, has a lot of info, so hopefully you're taking it all in okay. I know you're going to be out of town after I get back, so I'll be able to check email again once I get back. So if you are able to send email and whatnot, please do if you have any questions. It's quite a bit of material to take in right here, and I definitely want to make sure that you understand everything. So anyway, what we're going to do is, instead of strumming the chords, which is me just playing straight through it, we're going to arpeggiate the chords, which means we are playing arpeggios of the chord. And an arpeggio is playing one note of a chord at a time. So that's why it's written like you have A minor, But instead of strumming it like that, we're going to just do it like this. So you see I'm still holding the A minor shape, but I'm only playing one note at a time. Okay, so when we start with the open A minor, we're going to ascend all the way up to an octave higher, and then when we get down to the E minor, which is right after that, we're going to descend all the way to the octave below. This proves to be a fairly difficult chord exercise for most people, so what I invite you to do is break this up into very small pieces, so this way you're not overwhelmed by trying to do the whole thing at once. So wherever you find a place that is challenging, say for example like going from the B diminished into the C chord, if that's a challenge, just keep going back and forth between those two chords until it becomes easier. So, alright, here is the whole thing. So you got A minor. The other thing I want to mention, another thing, I showed you the passing chord stuff with showing a whole step in between the two root notes. It's like between the C and the D minor. You get that note in the middle that we're kind of filling the gap in with there, right? So I'm taking it a bit further on some of these. Like between the A minor and the B diminished, where you do have a half or that whole step in there, you typically don't pass or use a diminished into a diminished, but I still think it sounds okay, and it's good practice, so we're doing that. And then looking at, say, the E minor into the F major chord, because it's a half step between the E and the F note, I think it sounds best to go E minor, E diminished, then up to the F. So I'm keeping the same root note there between the E minor and the E diminished. So even though there's not a whole step in between, I'm still using that diminished as like a transition from one chord to the next. Okay. Alright, I think that covers everything. Now, here we go. So we have A minor, A sharp diminished, B diminished, C, C sharp diminished, D minor, D sharp diminished, E minor, E diminished, F, F sharp diminished, G, G sharp diminished, A minor, E minor. I am barring the minor chords starting on the low E. So again, E minor, E diminished, D minor, D diminished, C major, C diminished, B diminished, A minor, A diminished, G major, G diminished, F, F diminished, E minor, and then hit that single E to resolve the whole thing. And my screen just blanked out on me. There we go. This is something good if you've ever worked on finger picking. This would be a good one to finger pick too. That. So hopefully this is enough material to keep you busy for a bit. Again, if you have any questions for me and you're able to send me an email, you need to call me, that works too. Just get a hold of me any way you need to. Ask me any questions you have about the material, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And hope you enjoy your vacation as well. And let's see, we'll plan on seeing you back. I know you're going to be gone the last 2 weeks. So I'm assuming we're planning on being back July 3rd. If not, let me know. Let me know when you plan on being back, and we'll make it happen. All right, we'll see you soon.